I know it's tempting, isn't it, to go and sit outside. It's still nice outside. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's supposed to rain later, so make the most of it while you can. So I'm really pleased to introduce Lillian Soon from the University of York, so another one of our locals. We're developing the Future Teacher, What's Worked. So give Lillian a warm welcome, and I'll pass over to you. You're going to use the lectern or do you want to use that?
I think I'm due to use this. If I do wander off, I will come towards the mic and pick that up. So please feel free to follow along on the slides, on QR code, or on the bit.ly, FT34JUN for June. Okay, so it's been quite an interesting day. I've been sat mostly here in this suite, listening to all the presentations, and I was trying to kind of come at it from, like, what's the difference in this angle? So it's quite deceptive. It looks like it's a University of York branded presentation, which it kind of is, but I have multiple digital identities, don't say personalities, multiple digital identities, as I'm sure we all do. So I have two hats on, one as educational advisor at University of York, where I do my future teacher work, okay? So the Future Teacher program, my involvement, I'm wandering away already. So my involvement started with the context of staff development. So I've been doing staff development, academic staff skills development for many, many years. So this is probably my third phase, if you like. So I've done it in further education, I've done it as a consultant, and then went to the private sector, and then I've come back and I'm working at HE level. And I kind of noticed that I'd come back and the problem was still the same. So I'd been out wandering and I'd come back and people were still talking about the technophobes and the Luddites and the people who weren't engaging in staff development. Because I went to the Durham Blackboard conference in 2018, not having touched Blackboard for, 12 years, and I came back and I thought, it still looks the same. That's interesting. And the problems were still the same. So this was a keynote by Sharon Flynn, where she showed, their approaches at National University of Ireland, their approaches to staff development. Came away with quite a lot of interesting ideas, and but I kind of realized that some things hadn't changed, and we all had the same problem with academic staff development. We all kind of did similar things, I think. So tell me if this is similar to maybe what you do. So the National University of Ireland had this list, if you like. They did, as an e-learning team, they did help desk support, they did online support, they collected user stories or case studies, they ran workshops and festivals sometimes, and I'm sure you'll have it in your own organizations. You run a workshop and one person turns up, and it's taken you a few days to prep for this workshop. Yeah, some nods. We do projects, and some of us have formal courses and training programs for our staff, right? PG, certs type programs and things like that. And there was a lot of similarity at the University of York. We had we did one-off events as well. We didn't do this fancy workshops and festivals thing. We had cross-university learning and teaching conferences, but we also ran user group forums. Sometimes people just want to talk about one technology, so yeah, we ran those. We also did webinars, okay? And that was the saddest thing. I was quite new to the university, and I was tasked with, try and develop your program with some webinars thrown in for staff development. So went along, ran a couple of quite successful ones, but very low turnouts. There might be 4 people attending, and there's 2 of you presenting on a webinar. And then it got to the point where a colleague was presenting the next webinar, and there was one person. You might as well have had a chat and created a podcast, because that would have been more cost effective. So it got me thinking about all these other things that weren't productive, shall we say, in terms of value for money, in terms of what we were doing with our time to affect our colleagues' staff skills. And obviously we do run things like CMALT as well. So looking at all that, this is one thing I kind of noticed we all have in common. We do kind of talk about, and this is something Sharon Flynn at that keynote said, we do want to know if we're being effective and productive with our time. We kind of want to justify the fact that this university's got an e-learning team centrally as a resource? How many people are we training? What progress are people making in their digital skills, etc.? So the other interesting thing that came out of her talk was this idea of different staff groups. And I was quite taken with this kind of distribution curve idea. Although it's taken me a while to come back to it, because I then fell asleep on this idea. And 2 years later, I read a book by Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Anyone read that book? Yeah? It's a bright orange book. He does TED Talks as well, Hans Rosling. And it's about facts, you know, and it's about thinking about people not just as us and them, or students who come to lectures and students who don't, or staff who engage and staff who don't, but being more, having more differentiated groupings of people, okay? It's not a new idea. It's come all the way back from, you know, Rogers' diffusion of innovations and stuff like that. It's got nice terminology if we ever wanted to label people, not that we want to. But it kind of made me think we need different strategies for different groups, right? You've got your very engaged staff, and we seem to do more and more stuff for the very engaged people because the same people turn up to everything. Would you agree? Yeah. So how do you get at the people who aren't coming? And the thing about webinars is if you don't even have headset and mic at your desk, you're not going to attend a webinar. It could come down to having a £3 set, you know, at your desk to attend a webinar. So it got me thinking about, you know, how we need to engage people differently. And I use this curve now when I talk to tutors and we plan student engagement activities. We talk about this histogram, you know, where are your students, you know, which group, when you're planning this intervention, which group really are you targeting? The super engaged, the not so engaged, the unengaged? So I kind of thought, actually, going back to that original keynote, we could start thinking about staff engaging with learning experiences in the same way as we think about students engaging. Okay, so you've got strategies for the super engaged, and I'm sure our friends here from Lancashire will agree, you've got your digital champions, they're on the far right. And then you've got the people who are, you know, you make them come, they will come. But, you know, okay, all right, they'll do the stuff. And then you've got your, nope, what I'm doing is fine, I can't do anything more than type, I don't even know how to type, you know, you can't engage me, don't come near me. So clearly, we've got to have different strategies for all these different groups. And then what's worse is, for some people, you've got your tough crowd. It's not a normal distribution curve, it's skewed left. You've got a really tough crowd, they really don't want to know, you haven't got management on board, you've got no, you've got no authority, you totally have no authority. Luckily, I hope most of us are not in that position, because we're here at the conference today. So I was thinking, it's all very well having strategies for the different groups, but how about being more ambitious, okay? How about trying to skew that normal distribution curve over there to your right? Yeah. So what strategies would it take to do that, you know, instead of accepting the normal distribution curve? So the question really is about changing cultures. It's not just about getting people up to a certain set of competencies, it's about changing cultures. I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all committed to doing if you're into staff development. Okay, so that's quite a hard question to answer. But clearly it needs new approaches, right? Clearly just continuing to run workshops, continuing to plan webinars and write case studies isn't going to be enough. Clearly we have to do something different. So I was looking at Chrissy Narenzi's doctoral thesis that she put out. She very helpfully has collected together all that we ever need to know about, if you like, the history of staff development when it comes to learning technologies. I highly recommend that you read her. If you access my notes in the speaker notes, you've got a link to her PhD thesis. And I thought, oh, thank goodness she's done this. But really, she's talking about diversifying provision, creating distributed academic staff communities who are actively engaged in CPD. Wow, what a dream world. All my colleagues actively engaged in CPD. That's really, really nice. So that's a nice dream, okay? So what would it take to make that happen? But I cottoned on to these words that she uses that kind of marries very well with my experience. This idea of cross-boundary collaboration, okay? That this is the thing that might work where some of our other standard approaches might not, okay? And what does that really mean? So going beyond, obviously, if you're thinking faculties, going beyond the faculty. If you're thinking of an organization, going beyond the organization. So I'm going to mention you guys again. You very naturally developed this thing and then felt like it would benefit from much more collaboration, much more participation from a lot of people. And that's where when we get to that point, when we're starting to skew that distribution curve, that's where we get to. We start to go into cross-boundary areas. And obviously, you know, it actually improves motivation and engagement. Okay, so we're just going to do a moment of reflection here, because I've been talking for quite a bit. I'm going to ask you to interact with me. Most of you have got some gadgets, but if you don't have a gadget, just write it down. So here's a little bit.ly, so I'd like you to think about your own e-learning journey. When was the first time, maybe you're a teacher, maybe it was your first job, when's the first time you started your e-learning journey? For some of us, it's a real throwback. But think about it and go to that link and type it in. If you're typing your message in, on the top right there's a view messages. Okay, so we've got some answers there. It's not overly full of answers, but we've got some previous answers. You know, here's one I did earlier, okay? But so 8 years ago, first job for a Hefty funded project to get, right, wow, that was like straight into something quite high up, I would think. But that's quite cool. When you start supporting universities VLE, okay. Being introduced to the internet to use IMD for film studies, okay, that's quite, right. Run a workshop on web publishing for staff who previously had no web experience. Media studies teaching, very beginning in New Zealand. That sounds nice. Okay, right. So previous participants have gone all the way back and they start thinking about, right, when they were teaching. And you've got some examples here when people were like first teaching or first working with other staff. TEF teacher 25 years ago, helping colleagues nominated power user. Lovely phrase. That was it. That's when we all started. You know, someone taught you to use Word or something and then you cottoned on and you were using it a lot and then suddenly you got called a power user and you're helping others troubleshoot. And the next thing you know, you're like the e-learning champion, you know, or the digital champion. Okay, so that's really nice. So clearly for us, it was a journey. We didn't get to where we are now by starting and staying there. We've been on a journey ever since and something convinced us to continue learning in some way. Now you also recognize that we've got colleagues who don't continue learning in that way, right? And I think the magic really is in that point where we remember what started us off and what kept us going. Because that's where we need to trigger our colleagues to start adopting that change as well. And you never know what it is that causes that trigger. So when I was e-learning coordinator in FE College, I had a small group of people who went with me and learned with me that I could support. And then there was the rest of the staff who were kind of, maybe they were just watching and waiting to see what would happen. And I kept introducing different technologies and different things. And then one day, I just got that critical mass, because you never knew what it was that caught someone's imagination. And it got to the point where it was digital mobile devices, and suddenly they were in. They were like, ooh, that texting thing that you did, or ooh, that iPad, HP iPad that you're lending out to other tutors. Can we have a go? Can we take it home and have a play? That was crucial, that turning point, that mobile turning point. Okay, so I need to get back to my presentation on the left. Thank you so much. Okay. So thinking about these journeys then, thinking about when you kind of cross this boundary from being, I guess, teacher to supporter of other teachers, we've got these moments when it takes a little bit of reflecting, I think. You know, if I had to say to you, could you draw a line when you change from being, if you like, a teacher to becoming someone who supported others in their teaching? I would struggle, I think, to kind of find that fine line. For most of us, maybe if it was a job that you kind of went into, it's much easier to demarcate. For those of us who kind of have been working at the same job and then became a digital champion and then suddenly became an e-learning developer, etc., it's more blurred, isn't it? So what we're looking to do then is to help our colleagues to cross those boundaries, to move from where they are, where they've got this identity, I'm a teacher and I use technology, to maybe I lead others in using technology for teaching and learning, and then to keep that progression going. So when I joined the University of York, I happened to also come in with already participating in a project, cross-boundary project if you like, called the Future Teacher. So the Future Teacher project is a European-funded project, and it had quite an ambitious it was quite an ambitious project because it wanted us to kind of work across multiple countries developing staff, okay, digital skills, but specifically for teaching and learning. So you can access the link, and if I finish early, we can have a lot of time to play with the resources that we've generated as a result. But as a result of my engagement with this project, I kind of thought, I can't create a webinar for the University of York and create a webinar for these other people in my day job, on top of running workshops, writing case studies, supporting colleagues at their desks. It's quite a lot. And I was lucky that my team and my boss was kind of like, they could start to see that there were benefits to just making our Future Teacher webinars part and parcel of our everyday lives. And like I said, whereas our webinars were quite internal, what we noticed was that if we ever opened our webinars out to the rest of the world, the attendance rate would go through the roof. So that's what we started doing. We started kind of engaging our colleagues in this kind of the webinars that we were running on Future Teacher sites. So what I'm going to do is just go to that page, if that's all right. Thank you. So on that site, we have quite a lot of talks. So where it says click here to view each Future Teacher talk, I clearly expected to be able to click. I do apologize. Top, next to the home icon, yeah, the drop down, that's it. So we've been doing this since March 2017, and we've developed from scratch a community, okay? And those of you who have been involved in it will know how it can be a slow start, or you might not even have a plan for where you're going. You just make a start, and then you see what happens. But we made a start, and we very quickly ramped up, and we kept the topics going. And we tried to kind of do the entire landscape of topics that people might be interested in, because you didn't know what would grab the attention of the audience. So what happened was, because I was doing it as part of my University of York job as well, what I was able to do was to bring in all the people at the university who should be kind of doing their sharing good practice beyond the university walls, beyond that boundary, crossing that boundary. And so I was able to kind of bring them into the Future Teacher talks, okay? So can we go back to the slides, please? So all those are available for you to look at. Obviously, you can follow the link. Okay, so so these are some examples of the kind of engagement that we started to get with people who were starting to realize that because they had access to these resources, they could offer them to their staff. So they could say to staff as part of their monthly staff development opportunities, attend a Future Teacher webinar, okay? We often ask people when we design the program to share with us their stories. Has anybody got any experience of X, Y, or Z? Can you come in and speak? And as we started to do this and we had more and more people kind of engage with all the different activities and mentions, and we had quite interesting and innovative examples of practice. So let me go. So people were starting to embed them. Lots of universities were starting to embed it as part of their websites, apart from University of York. Okay, so that was good. Kind of like what's happening at Lancashire as well. But, you know, people were picking it up and adding it to OER, lists of OER resources, which is great. So that's a very useful site as well. Follow. Go find that tweet and go stick your things on that sheet as well, okay? These are all opportunities. Anglia Ruskin added it to their site as well. So we had quite a lot of engagement, and this hasn't been updated recently, in the last few months anyway, but in a year, we went from like 81 registration, so it's about 50% uptake. You know, people register and then they forget, don't they? And you have to remind them before the webinar starts. But we got to the point, like with inclusive practice, we had 119 attendees at the webinar. And then nowadays, we're having like, say, there's 117 sign-ups for technology enhanced programs and 93 attendees. That's quite a good, close number. And we're getting more and more of those as well. So numbers keep growing, keep engaging. And then you've got things like, you know, talking to others here and going, ooh, we should get our communities working together, promote your community so more people can find out about and have more choice. So we're really starting to cross digital boundaries now as well, not just. And the advantage of all this is that you can imagine for your digital champions, you know, you put up, sorry, I'm going to keep using that as an example because it's perfect that they're here. So you've got your digital champions and they've traveled that journey, and there's an opportunity for them to do more than just share it at that university. They can share it at so many other webinars, online webinars, or other opportunities to share the good practice with other people. And that works in two ways. It allows the people on your distribution curve or on the right-hand side even more opportunities, okay, to go from being, and now I'm going to quickly go backwards to the terminology that I wanted, to go from being, if you like, an expert, where they're quite good at using the technology, to becoming leaders, and then for them to one day move into this idea of being pioneers with what they do. So they can see a progression path, okay? So this promotes their journey. So that's for the people on the far right. And for the others, you know, they get exposure and they get much more motivated if they're attending something. Let's face it, you know, we used to have this phrase, not invented here. But with staff development, it's almost the opposite. If I'm standing up, they don't want to hear me, yeah? They're more interested in people who have come from 200 miles away to deliver exactly the same session that next door neighbor sitting next to them could have done. But that's what they do. And that's a recognized fact. Someone must have done some psychology studies into that. So we take advantage of that by using something like this. So I have had so many more tutors attend webinars as a result of us being part of this community of practice. So we regularly now, we've had people start from scratch on webinars, and then people regularly signing up and attending webinars at the university who didn't attend our own webinars before. So we've got some great feedback from people. It all culminated in a conference. You know, it's really, really nice to meet people face to face, right? So we had this conference, and we had a lot of participants from, you know, we've got University of Nottingham, we've got NHS Leadership Academy, we've got University College London, we've got people from all over, Bath, Cardiff. I could name all the universities, but, you know, it's one of my jobs actually is to put a map together of where all the universities are who have engaged with our content and our kind of webinars, which is lovely. So I guess what I'm saying is that we had the standard staff development opportunities, and then adding this mix, which any of you can add in your organizations, brought about an extra level of participation from the staff. So any of them can volunteer to, when we announce the next topic, go, ooh, I'd like to share my superpower on that particular topic, using audio, using video, whatever it is that we happen to be talking about. So you therefore have a platform to offer your very engaged staff and your not so engaged staff to attend something that you don't have to do any work for. You just have to kind of promote it, which is great. Kind of, you know, I think there's a lot. We've got to work smarter to provide those extra opportunities. And what's the kind of experience that they get when they're there? So let's get into, I guess I'll have to come over there and move the mouse, will I? Sorry, this is very unorthodox, but I'm on that mouse and on that screen. Okay, cool. So, if I exit full screen for a minute, and we come here, I'm going to show you, for example, writing. So typically, what we do is we, after each webinar, we make our resources available, and you can download them. And we also make our webinar recording available. So down here is the webinar recording. So it's not so lonely a process. If you're just accessing a digital learning object, it can be slightly out of context for you just clicking through it. But what you have here is a webinar recording as well, and you can even look at the text chat that happened during the webinar. And that makes it a much more social experience, okay? So you want to try and read and interpret where we were at that point in time. And you get to see the camaraderie where you've got one delegate helping another. And even just that insight can be quite nice for people to experience. And I could not have done this if I was just working on my own at the university. This had to be a kind of collaborative thing between people to kind of put enough resource into this. So having opened up the resource, which was created in Xerti, you can kind of see our little faces. Oh, this happened to be the one, Alistair finally replaced his picture with a beard, and we were jealous, so we put beards on ourselves as well. So that's Ron on the right. He doesn't normally look like that. But typically, what our resources are like, our resources are quite interactive. So even though you might have people visiting these resources after the webinar, you get a sense of people who have passed before and what they said, which is quite nice, okay? So we embed quite a lot of digital practice into our resources to give people the opportunity of experiencing what we'd like them to teach with, you know, the kind of digital practices we'd like them to embed. So it gives them a feel for the kind of tools they could use in their practice. So give some reasons for, some reasons against, and then we, again, there's an embedded Google form. We do case studies, so this is Teresa McCannon from Warwick. And, so again, we have guest speakers, basically, who show their practice. We tend to do a very, very extensive mind map. This might, so this is very, very extensive mind map with lots and lots of our thoughts about, in this particular case, writing, ways to support writing. We try and put in a little bit of our own examples and therefore prompt people to think about their own examples, think about how they're going to develop their skills, and then, this is the Google form that they filled in earlier, and they get to see their own examples as well. So the other thing we do is we encourage people then to think about what one thing they'll do as a result of attending the webinar, and we encourage them to join the mailing list. So all that's there for you to kind of try as well. Hopefully there's not too much I'm intending to click. Thank you. Okay. So, impact on the university. We have had, obviously, all the opportunities to showcase what our staff are doing. So we've had audio, we've had social media, we've had inclusive practice, we've had using webinar tools, and obviously we have our own Blackboard Catalyst Award winner for MoCo, Amy, starring in our webinar that we ran two sessions ago on using webinars, okay? So we managed to expose quite a lot of staff to quite a lot of, to share quite a lot of practice, which allows them to do the reflection, and it makes them kind of move to a different level. But we see the next steps as something quite exciting. We feel that the new accessibility regulations are another opportunity for staff development. Okay, embedding it is very much something that we're doing at the University of York, and we're quite excited that this is an opportunity for everybody to get engaged with the agenda. And what we like to say is that all the future teacher content has accessibility and inclusive practice built in, because obviously Alistair McNaught has from JISC, he's just left JISC, but obviously while he was doing this with us, he has been there from the beginning with the design of everything. So you know that everything has been thought through from the point of view of the learner and how you can make things more inclusive. Okay. So just very quickly now, going into our resources and journeys, and then letting you play with the actual resources and ask questions. So the resources that we have for you, you can, what we've done is we've taken our webinars, we created the resources for the webinars, we've made those resources available for you to download and put into your own VLE, if that's what you want to do. The other thing we've done is we've then taken the original webinars and we've broken them into journeys, because no one really wants to sit through a 1 hour webinar recording. You know, I don't know about you, but if I do that, I tend to double speed and traipse through it, or I just click and see what the sexy pictures are, and then I stop and I might listen. Okay, and better still, there's a transcript, because I can scan with my eyes, right? So what we've done is we've broken it down, okay? We've broken it down to much smaller bite-sized things, much more reflective. We've amped it up with even more interactions, and we've put them into VLE. Now, I think most of us are very familiar with Blackboard and Moodle. Does anyone use, and Canvas, does anyone use something else?
We can just move to Desire to Learn, please.
Oh, Desire to Learn, okay. A-U-L-E-A. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So I think we might be coming full circle and starting to diversify our options, which is interesting. So if you just want to have a test of a different VLE, by all means go and sign up to this account and just have a, the resources are there, so you can just play and, it won't hurt basically. And people can do the journeys on there. What I've done is I've taken all those objects and I've put them in Blackboard. That looks familiar to most of you who use Blackboard. Done the same thing. And then I stuck them in Moodle as well for good measure, just to prove that this is how we do the OER thing. You know, download, stick it up into your own VLE, put your own forums in, obviously. So what we're going to do is actually kind of provide that whole piece of supporting you to kind of reuse these resources any which way you want. At the point where we have finished creating all of them in Moodle and Blackboard, you're welcome to download them as zip files complete and just stick them in your VLEs. And, you know, it's background stuff. But what I would say is that what we're going to do as we come towards the end of our Future Teacher funded project, we're going to go through that whole cycle again. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through all our webinars again, because we already have the resource there. But it's an opportunity again for fresh faces to come and contribute their stories on a particular topic. It helps us to keep that learning object fresh, because we'll go through broken links. How many times have you finished a project, gone to those resources and all the links have gone, or maybe they use Posterous, so my CMOL portfolio, none of the links work anymore. So, you know, it's part of being, I guess, digitally literate, that you have to kind of, anything that you make in this day and age, you've got to keep up with. And the next time round a webinar comes around, there might be a new kid on the block, a new tool, a new approach, a new emerging theory as well. So that's what we intend to do, to keep weaving that. So we'd really like people to kind of join us and participate. So there's a slide there on the OER. These are the actual webinar resources rather than the journey resources at this point in time. But keep in touch, and we'll obviously let you know when the others are ready. You can click on the picture and it will take you to some information about reusing the resources. So I won't go on about that, because I think you can play when we finish this bit. So this is about us and our hashtags, our identities, and the JISC mailing list that we're on, so you can keep in touch with the community. We're going to cross-pollinate with some other communities, and we have done with, like, say, Teresa McKinnon's community. And that's our next webinar, so join us, experience it, have a taste, have a flavor. Yeah, we hope to kind of see more people there. So, just to recap what I've gone through, and then we'll have a bit of playtime and we can do some Q&A. I started off talking about, you know, the standard ways we deliver staff development, and thinking, challenging if you like, can we change the culture of our organizations as well? Can we push and move that distribution curve so that it's a positive skew? Can we use the terminology on the DigComp.edu framework, which I kind of thought when I sat through other people's presentations today, they don't want to see another framework. It's yet another framework. How many frameworks does a girl need? But I tell you what's useful. The last time I looked at it, I kind of thought, because ETF, who work in further education, have a framework, right? And then we've got the GIST digital capabilities. Okay, so there's quite a lot of frameworks. But what's useful is actually, if you had to sit and compare frameworks, that is when you really, really buy into the framework that you're using. You really start to question it. Oh, how does this compare with that? Oh, I can see something that works, but that's got a different phrasing, and I really like what that's saying. Where can I find it in this framework that I'm working with? So having multiple frameworks is not a bad idea. It just allows you to do that critical analysis, right? We say this to our students, you know, critically analyze. Gives you something to kick back against. And also then thinking about staff development opportunities and how we've used it as a way to allow our staff to cross boundaries, and we really feel that this is moving us in that positive skew through the Future Teacher. Okay? So what I'm going to suggest now is, with the remaining time, we look at the resources, which is on bit.ly / some of you are taking pictures, FT30 UK. I'll go back to that slide. And then I'd also like you to kind of seriously think, rather than sitting through the session, this is what we do in our webinars. We always say, we want you to action plan a little thing as a result of this, listening to this and looking at these resources. We want you to do one thing as a result of this. And we've got examples in our webinar text chats where people have said what one thing they'll go away and do. So again, you can go back to that page and look at those resources and the text chats and engage with what other people have said. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the Future Teacher slide with the link so that you can jump into it, and then I'll wander around. I'm missing, there we go. Okay. So we've got a few minutes. We've got about 20 minutes for questions and answers.
How large is the community? So the Future Teacher 13, how many people are participating in that?
Okay, so the question is how many people are participating in the community. On the mailing list itself, I haven't checked recently, but we do get, it's a few hundred. We get different people signing up each month, and then we've got a core group of regulars as well. So by now it could be, more like 600, but I'd have to go in and go to the GIST mail and check. It's not overly, people do worry, like with the digital accessibility regulations, it's quite active, isn't it? There's quite a lot of posts. With ours, it's much more slimline. It tends to peak around the webinar time, and then it dies down again. But you've got that community to talk to if you need it. So we use Xerti for our creating our resources, which means that if anyone uses Xerti, they can download the objects and actually edit them, put their own case studies in, and put their own extra pages in. Do people here use Xerti? Does anyone here use Xerti? I've got one nod. Yeah, 2 nods. Okay. Yeah.
For that presentation, that was really useful, and I'm already going to go and have a look and see what I can steal from you. Yes, that's my one thing, is see what I can nick from your website and pass off as my own, obviously. Attribute and all of that, yeah. So can we say a very big thank you to Lillian for her session? And we've got another set of parallel sessions again.